Welcome back to Beyond Trauma. We are here in the Enneagram season.
Yeah.
And it has been a season also outside of the podcast, it sounds like. So like all of Beyond is captivated by the Enneagram right now.
Yeah, there's still a few that are just coming
to know.
But
that's beautiful.
That's the best part.
Yeah, and our community is super engaged with it as well. So it's been interesting for all of us to be so immersed in this space of talking about the Enneagram so much. Like it really is one of the first times in my life where so many people are talking to me about the Enneagram.
And I think there was like a wave a couple of years ago that I felt like, oh my gosh, so many people are talking about the Enneagram. This feels very different to me.
In what way?
It's not like we're talking about it from a just educational, like, oh, this is what that is, and the characterizations of the Enneagram, but this is like a group of people like in our real lives, but also like our community and our following that are coming and talking about it from a place of like true in-depth self-exploration and change and growth, not in this static
looking hard
way.
at it. Yeah.
It's not like, well, this is what I am or what do I need to figure out that I am, but more of like, what am I evolving into and where have I come from and what are these deeper layers of myself that I've never like noticed before.
Yeah.
It's beautiful.
It really is beautiful. And I'm super excited for this season as a whole. Just to talk about the Enneagram, I think as I was reflecting on our first intro episode, and it's been a couple weeks since we recorded that, so I've had some time to listen to it and think about, what are we really tasking ourselves with in this season? And I think I want to be really clear that this is not in any way an attempt to be exhaustive about the Enneagram or correct, or, as precise as you might find in like a Enneagram training or a book on the Enneagram. Like this is us talking about the Enneagram as a tool of self-discovery and truly a wisdom. And with that, what does it actually look like to utilize it and partner with it in the process of growth? Not as the main goal, but as a byproduct of how do we move past symptom reaction to deeper like character change.
I think my felt sense, and this is more, I think my role in it is this feels like a place I just get to like talk to my friends about the Enneagram. And we happen to be recording it.
Yes.
Less of like a let us teach you, and especially because I feel like I'm very much in the learning process. But like, how do we make sense of it? Where have we learned from? And how I think there's even like as many books as I'm currently like reading all at once on it. There's still a different level of like processing interpretation my brain is going through with it based on our therapeutic model, my own lived experiences. Like I'm taking information from multiple sources on it. And still kind of like
there's so many nuances. So
yes,
many people talk about it in different ways. And
so
that's really what the Enneagram to me is so beautiful, when it can become that, when people can actually try it on in their context and their lived experience and really, work out the ways that it applies. Like today, we're going to talk about the gut triad. And that's kind of how this first part of the season will go, is we're going to talk about the triads specifically and the numbers that make up those triads, but really just being patient with covering the Enneagram. And then my plans for the season to continue is to talk to members of our community, both at Beyond and then just around the world that we're in connection with, who represent some of the numbers. And hopefully we can collect the entire Enneagram and show some diversity there as well. But in us approaching the gut triad, 8, 9, and 1 all come at the world in a similar way at times. And then the way they work through it is very different at times. And then of the types of the people who may identify as 8, 9, or 1, they are all going to hear different pieces of what we're about to say. And some maybe say like, yeah, that really felt like me. And others say, that's interesting. I've never heard that described that way. And maybe some that are like, I don't know if that's me. And that's the whole purpose of describing and talking about the Enneagram and actually making it come alive in your relationships is you can start to really, really, wrestle with it for yourself. Dig past the pieces that seem flashy at the beginning or really alluring at the beginning, because those might just be identifications of the strategies that you most value in the world. And so dig deeper than that.
One way I've heard that described is the characterization of it.
Or the caricature.
That is like fun.
Yeah.
Like, I think there's a lot of like playfulness, and like it can be fun to like talk in that way and relate and connect to other people. But the true expression of the Enneagram is many layers deeper than just that, simple label or like simple concepts of what that person is.
Right. So what do you think about the gut triad?
Well, I'm in it.
You are in it as a 1.
I identify as a 1, which is in the gut triad. So I don't know. I do have a lot of thoughts, I would say, but I don't know if I have a lot of thoughts about it. I have a ton of feelings about it.
That's what I was really wanting to know is what meaning do you find in the 1 being a part of the gut triad for yourself? Like, what does that mean to you?
Well, I feel like I gave this disclaimer on the last episode, but this is a very new space for me.
To consider yourself a 1.
Yeah. Very new. So I still feel like this, like, toddling child as I'm trying to discover. I don't feel like I have a firm stance on, like, what meaning am I making of that?
Okay, then maybe this way in. Let's talk about what the word feeling means to you. So when different people across the Enneagram, between the gut triad, the heart triad, and the head triad, we all have similar language, but we mean different things when we say it. So feeling is typically associated with, like, I think of a visceral reaction to something like depression or anxiety or just something like that, where it's like, oh, I know what that feeling is in my body. But it sounds like you're using the word feeling in a different way. When you say, I have a lot of feelings about it, to me, you're talking like people in the gut triad talk, which is my gut tells me something. Like I have intuition wanderings about it. I don't know yet what they mean.
Yeah.
But I feel it in my body.
Yes.
But it's not necessarily like a sad, happy, mad. It's not like
an emotion. Yeah.
The difference between feeling and emotion. Let's talk about that.
Yeah.
What do you mean by that?
Well, I think I imagine it from the bottom up, kind of like as we talk about, like this is where a feeling happens. This is where an emotion happens. And this is where it kind of manifests into like a sense of or a thought about. And so, yeah, the meaning making piece. So it very much, when I say I have a feeling, it's like down low. It's in my body. I don't know. I don't have an emotional word to stick to it because it wouldn't be, I feel happy, sad, angry, disappointed. Like it wouldn't be an emotion about it, but it's just this rumbling, like a rumbling deep inside that I'm like, I don't know what to do with that yet.
Yes. I mean, you're capturing what I sometimes talk about as the embodied intuition of the gut triad, which is, it's like almost the way we typically think about thoughts being from the top of our heads, emotions in the middle there somewhere, and then this type of feeling or embodied intuition being at the very bottom, the root of the whole thing. So if somebody were to ask you how you feel about something, you wouldn't just say like, I like it, or it may not come out as quick and as sure. You may need some time to chew on it and really sense through your feeling about it, because you have to go from the question they're asking, which is at that top level of like, well, what do you think about this? Or what do you feel about this? If you don't have an immediate awareness of what it is that you're attending to in that space, you might have to spend some time really digging at it to get to, oh, this is what I'm feeling about it. Here's the emotions it brings up. And then here's what I think about it.
I think on a lot of subjects, if someone asks, like, what do you feel about that? My first direction would be to go to my thoughts about it.
It's
like
quick.
That would be, and I would likely have something. Like it would be there. I would have a thought, or I'd have a cognitive feeling, if that makes any sense. I could cognitively describe a feeling about it. The emotional part would be more of me, like drawing from my bank of therapeutic language of this is what would probably fit or be appropriate in that. And less
the emotion
of like,
that's connected to that thought.
But I don't think I experience a lot of moments where I feel really connected to the emotion of it. But then like the deeper piece of a feeling, if it was a really difficult question, like, what's it like to be in the gut triad?
Yeah.
Right. I got nothing up here for that. No
thoughts.
And I really don't have an emotion about it. But there's just a lot of that. I think the best word I have is like the rumbling. Like there's just so much of that, like spinning and stirring and like experiencing it.
Yeah.
And it hasn't filtered through yet.
So yeah, not a lot of articulation of what it brings up for you emotionally or necessarily what do you feel like has impacted you in your emotions to understand yourself as a part of the gut triad, and definitely not a lot of articulable ideas about it yet.
Yeah. The best way I'm experiencing that is like I'm listening to information on the one, like over and over, hoping it will come to a place of articulation.
Yeah.
Like over and over.
But it has not happened yet.
And I can like grasp something new each time. And I'm like, oh, I want to talk to somebody about this and really like sit with that. But something small sticks each time, but I cannot hear all of it at once. Like I cannot absorb and sit with like everything that's being said.
Because it's speaking straight to the rumbling and it just feels like, oh, that's a lot.
Yeah. So much.
Yeah. So within the gut triad, this triad is broadly characterized as dealing with anger in some way. So what that means then is we look at the gut triad as a whole dealing with anger. Each of the numbers that make up the gut triad, again, 8, 9, and 1, are going to deal with anger in a different way. Before we started this podcast, I'm in the room with a 1 and then Tyler's a 9. And I said the word anger, and both of you in some way said, like, what's that? Like, jokingly a little bit, but I think there's a lot of truth in it as well. Totally. That's like, I have blinded myself to anger, or I've tucked it away. I don't have it.
Yeah.
But I'm thinking of personal experience with you, where when you react the most, it's because your anger is lit up. And that's where it's just like, nope, you'll express your anger very precisely, but not flippantly or very frequently.
And it has to be very justified. Like it has inarguable defenses around it. This is like, I am so justified in my anger right now that nobody could
get you off it or
argue it, say it's wrong in any way.
Right. Yes. So there's the 1 coming out there. One of the ways that I sometimes will talk about this is this idea of being right. So 8, 9, and 1 are all concerned with this. And to a large degree, I mean, a lot, I'm not going to say all of the numbers, but a lot of them have some relationship to the concept of being right. But 8, 9s, and 1s are channeling their anger into rightness in some way. Sometimes I'll say that 8s will identify as I'm right. So it's very embodied, like, I don't care what you say. I know what is right. And that's what's going to be.
Yeah.
It's coming from that gut place. I don't need the thought. I don't really even need the emotion. And if you tap too hard on it, you're going to get a burst of anger. And
I could totally change positions of the argument and still be right.
Yeah, because I'm right.
Right.
That's the thing.
It's not what I'm saying or what I'm arguing that's right. It's me that's right.
It's me that's right, and I have my way. And sometimes you'll see 1s behave that way as well, but that's more so, in my experience, them playing games with the person they're arguing with rather than pursuing the idea of being right themselves. So 8s are typically oriented around, I'm right, I know what's right, I know what's unjust, I know what's not right or wrong, and I want to always be true to myself in that. Like, that's just going to be what happens. 9s, I sometimes will say, you're right. And this is, again, to kind of play with the idea of the putting away of the conflict that comes in arguing who is right.
Yeah.
It's just easy for them to say, you're right.
Yeah.
You're right. Conflict, dissolved.
Immediately dissolved. There's nothing left to argue.
What are you going to argue with me about? Yeah. You're right. And then 1s won't say either I'm right or you're right because that's too definitive. They'll say it is right. So the reason anything should happen is because it's right. The reason something shouldn't happen is because it's wrong. And then it's up to you to get on the right side of this. And I'm always going to be on the right side of it. But that's just because I know what's right, not because it's coming from me, but because there is a right way and a wrong way. And I'm always concerned with trying to find the right way.
Yeah.
Yeah. So what do you think of that? 8s, I'm right. 9s, you're right. 1s, it's right.
I mean, this is the first time like I've heard it in that way. And that just makes complete sense in my experience of 8s, 9s, and 1s, like in being in relationship with people from that place. Like there's very much that felt sense, and it has a similar appearance on the outside, like rightness is a focus, but it's that motivation of like what's being channeled in that. Is it me that's right, you that's always right, or this outside factor?
Yes. And I think that's where so often, and all the types of the Enneagram are so often misunderstood. And that gets deeper than the caricature, because if you look at the passions, as sometimes it's called, of each of the types, 8s are associated with lust, 9s are associated with laziness, or I like to call it slothfulness. That's a little bit closer to me than the negative connotations around lazy. And the 1s around anger, or sometimes it's like certainty. Like I have this channeling of my force in the world towards the certainty on what is right and what is wrong. But those are only, again, the top layer. The reason each of these numbers identifies with that could be for so many different things. So if we talk about the 8s and think about lust, what that means is not what we typically associate lust with sexuality, though it can sometimes be that. 8 in lust means, like, I think of like gusto, like with like, I'm going to do it with everything in me. If I'm going to do it, I might as well do it all the way. That is, like, to me, the whole thing of the 8. And so if you think about I'm right, they're going to be certain, they're going to be all cards on the table for that purpose, like all energy in, gas pedal to the floor. Why brake if the point is to go forward? So what do you think about 8's?
Yeah, I'm just
force
thinking
and lust
of a couple of people in my life that we've never talked Enneagram, but that I would say I feel them as an 8. And it's a big energy.
Yes, that's like another hallmark of the 8.
Big energy that doesn't have to just be like boisterous and loud. Like I've seen that version of it too, but it's just the presence in the room. Like you feel the force that is present with that person. Yeah.
And I like that you're pointing out that it doesn't have to be extroverted or loud.
Yeah.
It can also be the other way. And that's a lot of the different literature you'll find on the Enneagram, or if you're working with somebody who sees it as a wisdom tradition, you'll hear them talk about the 8s as being concerned with the extremes. So either they're going to go with really loud all the time or really quiet all the time. Like it's this swinging between, I'm either going to be completely outward with my energy or very much inward. And this is where you can see 8s fall into leadership so easily, because they seem to be the ones in the space that know what they're doing, whether it's outward and energy out, or it's inward, focused really intensely on the thing that they're concerned with.
Would you say, like this is just, again, a felt sense of, but I want to see if it lines up. There's this experience of fearlessness, but then as you sit longer and like learn more, it's really just masking fear. Like it feels like there is insecurity or fear or uncertainty in it, but the mask of like fearless, like I'm headed in this direction. I'm not timid about it. I'm not uncertain about it. Like we're going.
So we'll circle back to this in the head triad with some presentations of 6s, because there's sometimes a response to the fear in 6s as well, which is a part of the fear head triad, where they are responding to the fear with denying it and going out. But for 8s to respond in that way, there is an element of what I would actually reinterpret as insecurity. So fear to me and insecurity are a bit different. The 8s are worried about my not enoughness, and they're doubling down with I am enough because I'm going to do it this way. Or when I do this really well, I am enough. It's a response to insecurity or weakness. And they might be afraid about that, but it's not going to come up as, well, I'm anxious or I'm fearful of this.
Yeah, not fear of an outside circumstance of some sort.
An internal insecurity or weakness.
Yes.
Yeah. And largely, in that you'll hear again, origin stories of the types, 8s at some point in their life were completely exploited or witnessed devastating exploitation and tasked themselves with justifying and righting the wrong, or seeking justice rather than justifying, seeking justice and righting the wrong themselves. No one else is going to do it. Everyone else was complicit with this exploitation. I have to be the one that does it right.
A fear of not having those needs met, not being loved and accepted. And so this kind of swing in the pendulum into an overcompensation for I will demand it in ways.
Yes, exactly. I will manifest it in my forcefulness.
Yeah.
You'll see social justice advocates or counselors or sometimes lawyers or these people that are, again, the caricature level of the 8, where it's like, man, their entire life is devoted to righting the wrong that they perceived so early on in life. And yeah, I mean, that to me is just, again, seeing 8s in the classic representation of their passion and their compulsion. So again, the lust of forcefulness and doing it all or nothing. Yeah. Any more thoughts on 8s?
I keep imagining as we get to these episodes where we actually have someone representing each type. How cool would it be to have 3 of each, like 3 8s sitting in conversation with each other about it, or 3 1s sitting in conversation with each other about it.
You would see a lot of diversity.
Yeah.
Where they might identify with some of these words. 8s typically, in my experience, are slow to warm with the Enneagram because it feels like it boxes them, puts them in a box and says, which again, 8s would be naturally averse to if their thought is, no, I need to be all or nothing with my expansion, nothing in my way. I have to be the one to go. And so if you try to categorize or label them, that's again, you're tripping you're setting them up to fail, basically. But if they can learn to identify with it and start to say, oh, this is how I move through the world with all or nothing, they can own it. Yeah, they can own it. As you then start to dig deeper into the work of the 8, which is to start to recognize the very thing you pointed out, which is that your forcefulness and your certainty in the steps forward may be a coping strategy for the insecurity and weakness that you feel.
Yeah. And almost hindering you from really having those needs met.
Exactly. Yes. So just very briefly, the 8s are connected to 5 and 2. 5 in unhealth and 2 in health. That's the view that I subscribe to, which is that we have a stress path and a growth path. So when 8s are unhealthy, quote unquote, which means they're asleep to themselves, they're just acting on their gut compulsion, they're not able to find the space to be reflective or to have softness in their world, they will have a very 5-like way of paying attention to their own needs, which is likely not, and they'll just be concerned with doing things all or nothing, doing it right because it's going to get me to the next place. So this puzzle-like way of approaching the world. Whereas if 8s can start to recognize the reason they're working so hard all the time, or the reason they're trying to wring out the everything of life, they can start to recognize that I'm actually doing this because of scarcity. Like I'm worried about not having enough, not being enough for a moment to pass by without me taking complete advantage of it. And so I'm reacting.
Yeah.
And if they can do that, and especially in the context of safe people in their life and people that care about them, that see how much they are concerned with everybody being taken care of, then they can actually soften into their growth path of 2, which is when they start to become okay with the idea that life is a balance.
Yeah.
It doesn't have to be all or nothing all the time. We can slow down, we can enjoy a moment with other people and help them celebrate what they're doing and enjoying, not just concerned with who's being exploited and who's the one doing the exploitation, and how can I start to plot against them, essentially, to restore justice in the world. But I can soften, I can be okay with gray, not black or white. I can be okay with the idea that it's not all or nothing. And I can just enjoy being with people, and put down my armor and my sword and just be with. What came up for you?
I love talking about the stress and growth paths. Like, to me, it does take it outside of this static box, right? Like, don't put me in a box of any certain type, but this, like, there's so much more fluidity to it. And that stress and growth can be over a journey of like a lifetime of growth, but it can also be like moment to moment. Like, it can be within, like, I'm in a really stressful season of life, and this week I'm seeing more of my stress path traits show up. But next week I could find my footing and I could really like show up more in like my growth direction. Like, I think I started in this journey with this mindset of, where am I? How do I prevent from going backwards? And how do I start moving forwards? So, like, how do I become this healthy thing?
There's the one.
And looking for a map that was going to tell me how to do that. And then realizing, like, oh no, like, there is this like fluidity to it. It's not just a linear process of how do you get from this point to this point and then you've arrived.
And that's, to me, the Enneagram is all about the diversity of strategy available to each human. So 8s are really well poised in this, and so are 1s. And really, all of the gut triad has so much diversity because each of you are connected to the other respective triads. So 8s are connected to the head triad in 5, the gut triad in their core type, and the heart triad in 2s. What that means to me is they have a really well-balanced way forward if they can find the strategy that works for them. And we have a fly in set.
We do.
If they can find a space of recognizing that the strategies available to them can help them be balanced. They can be aware of things in their head. They can be true to their intuition and authentic in their gut. And they can also feel deeply and feel generously in their heart triad with the 2. So again, just a great diversity available to the 8. But getting them to the space of recognizing their weakness is, again, antithetical to their core strategy, which is to say, I don't have weakness. I don't have insecurity or vulnerability. I'm just strong. So that growth process can be really hard.
I just think of the safety that is required for all humans, but for an 8 especially, like safety that's reassured with safety.
Yes,
and
exactly.
backed up by more safety, to be able to sink into that softness of like vulnerability and insecurity.
And a lot of times you'll see, and this is true for all types, that the only time we're really willing to look behind the curtain of ourselves is when our main strategy fails in front of us. Like in
That's
front of our
something
face.
We've talked about outside of the Enneagram a lot.
The only time you're going to let go of your core strategies is when it fails you. And so what happens when an 8, in their gusto and their forcefulness and their certainty and in their all or nothing, they actually end up hurting themselves or others.
And usually not just when it fails you once, when it's very consistently failing you. And you said, I've tried to like dial it up, and I've tried to dial it down, and I've tried to like morph it into another form. But this strategy is creating increasingly more problems in my life rather than help.
Yes. So I can't wait for the 8 episode. That's going to be great. 9s. So 9s, the core passion there is labeled a lot of times laziness. I like slothfulness, because 9s are dealing with anger by denying it. So I don't have it. Again, you do. The rightness is you have what is right, and that's fine. I'm willing to be completely on your side in this moment if it means that we're going to get out of it and get out of the tension. I'm just going to, do whatever needs to happen for there to be peace in this space. But again, that means that they will have an inherently troublesome relationship with their own anger, because anger promotes activation and behavior, like change on the outside. So if they're aware of their anger and aware of what's happening to them, they then are more likely to betray themselves and their strategy, which is to maintain peace at all cost, or maintain the lack of direct tension and pressure. If they speak to their anger, that's going to create more pressure, because you have to now set boundaries and protect those boundaries. You have to actually be forthcoming with your desires and your wants, and also explicit about your pain and the things that are coming your way that are troubling you, so that in the mind and heart of a 9 can say, well, it's just easier to fall asleep to myself than it would be to actually name any of these things.
There's a moment and I remember just recently, it was like maybe a week or two ago, where you were saying to a couple of 9s, I don't like, it's not laziness. And they were like, so I keep hearing you wanting to correct that label on it, I think because of all the negative connotation that comes with laziness. But I just found it so comical in that moment that I was like,
maybe it is lazy.
And I think it's outside of what we think of stereotypical of not willing to contribute to society in some form or fashion. But more of just
or expecting handouts from other people, or these connotations that are so associated with laziness sometimes, like, oh, you just want everything handed to you in life, you don't want to work hard, that's
you don't have any passions you're pursuing, or like it's
all of those things are like, that's not what we're talking about. Yes, because 9s are just some of my favorite humans. Very caring, such good listeners just by nature, thoughtful, creative.
Great therapists.
Great. Yes, they do. But in that, they're connected again. So their relationship to anger can be challenging for them to recognize their weakness, which is that I don't have enough to meet the demands of my world. Like, I'm not enough. Similar to the 8 in that way of the insecurity and the vulnerability. But with the 9s, it's, I can't pay attention to my needs. I can't really pay attention to the pain that I've been put through, or the ways that I've been wronged, because that's going to create more tension in me to actually do something about it. So just fall asleep to it. It's okay. So sometimes 9s can be the doormat of a situation, because it's just easier for them to lay down and take it than it is for them to stand up and do anything about it. But that doesn't mean that they don't have the anger, that they don't have the feeling of, no, this is wrong. And if a 9 is pushed far enough, you'll see an immense gut blow up.
I have yet to experience that, which is so fascinating, because I've got several different types of 9s in my life, not just even at work, but I haven't seen that moment, and it's so interesting. And I guess I haven't experienced it even within myself of like talking about anger in this in the gut triad, but it feels like it would require so much to get into that space.
And that's again where it's not something you're going to see a lot, because it challenges the 9's number one way of working through the world, which is to resist tension and direct focus on my own feelings, or the different things that have hurt me, or the wrongs in the world. Like, just fall asleep to it. It's easier. So to see an outburst like that means that they've been deeply wounded, or likely somebody in their life has been deeply wounded, and they're going to stand up for it. Sandwiched between the 8 and the 1, it's a tough place for a 9 whose strategy is to deny anger. They have it all around them.
So interesting, because of the wings being the 8 and the 1, and that being the strategy that could be utilized or borrowed. I think if for not good or bad, but like in either direction, like we can utilize those strategies in a place of health. Like they can really be of benefit to us and be supportive to us and being in a healthy place, but we can also utilize those strategies from a place of unhealth too.
And when 9s are unhealthy or under stress, they have the path to 6. And so what that means for nines is that anxiety can become a problem, that I can start to worry about the stability of my relationships and whether or not we're clearly communicating and connecting well. And in that fall back even farther of sleep to themselves and just become paralyzed in that fear and in that indecision. And I love connecting with nines on this because I just go to sleep.
Like literally, not just like if there's, figuratively.
Yes. And Tyler, like I remember you and I talking about this, like if there's too much tension in the space, like I'll just like go to bed. Like that's just easier than being awake for it, because then you also have the excuse of like, well, I was sleeping, so I don't know what happened.
Ryan does that, which he's not a 9, but that's his
way.
That is his stress path. And it's like, I'm so tired, zonk. And I'm like, I'm so tired, I will be up for like 2 days straight and just do whatever I have to do.
And I'm the same way as you in that way. And I would imagine for Ryan, like I've heard 3s talk about this as well. Like it's I'm so angry about it, I have to go to bed. Like I'm so, filled with emotion that I have to go to sleep. But in that as well for the 9s, I think there's so much fear around the cost of actually speaking to the injustice. Like it feels so overwhelming to think about actually trying to change this thing. I just can't do it.
Yeah.
So asleep we go.
As you talked in the 8 about what early life experiences possibly shaped the 8 and that, like they were met with tremendous I can't remember the word that you used, but these exploitation, yeah 9, I'm curious what the like story is around that, but I just feel this sense of like it is a place where like your needs and desires and feelings aren't prioritized, in fact highly neglected or ignored, dismissed. And so for you to hold that tension in your own body and to repetitively not have it acknowledged and felt and met is too much to handle. So we have to repress it.
Yes. And I think that so often there's a recognition early on for 9s that by doing that, by suppressing my own awareness of what pain has been caused to me and what anger I do feel about it, that by doing that, it actually gets better on the surface. The tension releases. Oh, people are happier. People are more or actually less focused on me and more able to just let this space be peaceful than when I was so concerned with my anger or with my feelings. So I'm going to continue to do that, and that reinforces that relationship to falling asleep to themselves. They just stopped doing it because it clearly worked. Like it created a space of harmony on the outside.
It reduced the tension, the internal tension, but also was a way to get the needs met of affirmation and validation. And
right. And in the 8s, they very same thing. They felt the exploitation and they said, the only one that's going to meet my needs is me. No one else will do it. And so the way I'm going to do it is stand up for myself, and I'm going to stand up for injustice in the world. But it's not because I expect you to be thankful to me. It's because that was wrong. And if that's happening to you, it could happen to me. No way. Stamp it out. That, again, I think for the 9s is such a tragic reciprocal conditioning of that space. When 9s are healthy, or in touch with their needs and in touch with their, the boundaries that are important to maintain and what feels safe and what doesn't, they grow into 3, which that space for them means that they can actually, and I get like, it's so beautiful to think of 9s in this way, because when they can feel safe enough and grounded enough, supported enough to actually take a step forward in their passion and in their creativity and their desires, and actually start to try on some things, like take up space in a room. What's that like? Like actually, value yourself enough to speak to your desires and show up for yourself. Amazing things can happen. They can actually become such amazing leaders and also just beautiful friends to have, as they will show up and they will be there, but also aware of their needs and the cost that it will be to them. Be very transparent with that. But ultimately a force of harmony in the world. Like I want to bring peace and equality and equanimity to the spaces I'm in.
I think of the phrase we use a lot, like the soft and strong. I
Mm-hmm.
imagine that type of leadership. It's this soft and strong. It's
beautiful.
Grounded.
Yeah.
But very, it's grounded and solid, but very gentle and approachable.
How amazing. Yes. And to get to that space, they have to recognize the pain that they've been put through and the steps that they've moved away from themselves, like the steps into sleep that they've really experienced, and how much of their actual experience, their emotional and mental and physical experience, that they've fallen asleep to. And that's challenging. Again, just as it was to the 8, it challenges their core strategy in the world, which is to fall asleep to it.
Yeah.
So
are we ready?
Are we ready?
Here we go.
Yeah. What do you? Yeah. Ones.
Tell me about myself, Bridger.
So, I again, anger is what we're talking about with the gut triad, and we're keeping it pretty broad. But to use the right language, ones believe that there is right and wrong in the world. That's fundamental. It's not arguable, and it's not because I believe it. It just is. Like it is the thing that holds space and time together is right and wrong.
I'm struggling even there. So like this is where, like, if this wasn't a reciprocal conversation, if I was on a podcast, I would now be hung up on that one statement for the next 30 minutes while the
what
person goes on to talk. Because my felt experience, like, what I want to say is I don't actually believe that to be true. That there's not, like, I don't believe it to be true that there's only right and wrong in the world. I fundamentally and philosophically disagree with that. But as I reflect on at least certain spaces, I see how I function with that construct to be true.
When do you feel like you can see that there is more than right and wrong? What has to happen for you to be able to believe that?
I don't know if I know where you're headed with the question. I don't know if I know the right answer. No. I'm playing into this a bit.
Oh, are you? Are you sure?
No. I don't know if I really know what you're asking in that. I think as you ask that question, what comes up for me is just a general sense of I feel like I'm I'm more safe and stable and healthy when I can let go of those constructs, if I'm in an activated place. And then even some that I don't know if I feel like activation in my body, but feel just, there's certain things I know I get hung up on and feel like, there's just a way that just needs to be done a certain way. And I just have such a desire to do it. The rumbling. Yes. And I don't know how to, I can like sit back and not do it, but I feel it, like I should be doing this or taking care of this, or it should look or be a certain way.
The shoulds.
But I don't know that I'm always in a place of feeling unstable or unsafe or activated in that. I think the example coming to mind is like decorating, like the office aesthetic. That is like a rumbling in my body of things should be this certain way, and I can resist engaging in it, but I feel this.
Yes, it needs to be. I think also with things that are a bit more temporary, it's easy to see. Like decoration can change. But what about when a relationship falls apart? Those are things that, like, you will fall back. And I've seen you do it, like onto what's the right way to go about this and what is the wrong way to go about this. Like under immense stress, right and wrong win the day. Like it's just the way you do it.
Yeah.
Like, well, you may not use the words right and wrong, but what you're looking for is there is a way that is appropriate and honest and just and good, and that looks like this.
Yeah.
And then there are so many ways that don't, and you should be ashamed of yourself, like, and other people, like it's cringeworthy when people do it not the way that feels just and right and good and honest.
So what I struggle to like make sense of is in all of the other areas where I don't feel like I have that, but those are on topics and things that don't feel like they come into conflict with like a core value.
Exactly.
That's what I would say is like a core value of mine.
Yes.
it feels easy to say there's space and room for people to have different values on this. And this can be like a space of, like flexibility and diversity of values. But then there's certain areas that feel like it's probably related to the feeling is that like someone's like been hurt or like
there is injustice.
Yeah.
And you should
respond.
Yeah. So to me, and if we're talking about you individually, that's a little bit more specific.
Right.
But I would characterize that as more leaning towards health, or a desire to lean towards the health of the one, which is in the 7 of recognizing that it's okay for things to not be perfect all the time. It's okay for me to let go of the responsibility taking that I have to be the one to right the wrongs in the world. It's
I feel
okay.
That too sometimes. I know
That you take responsibility, or that you
no,
let
like
it go.
As you're describing that, my body resonates with that feeling. I feel like there's a place of letting that go, but I deeply resonate with what that feels like and have a lot of knowledge of that feeling of like, I have to take responsibility and do it myself to ensure that it happens.
Yes. And again, I think that's when we think about the one where you're doing it because wrong is so bad. Like wrong has so many consequences. Wrong takes away from life. It's not just this like heady argument over logic and rationale. It's not about philosophy or politics or something like that. This is about the consequences of what happens when wrong enters the space.
Yeah.
When wrong enters the space, people get hurt. I'm left alone. I'm hurt. Pain and suffering and death come when wrong enters the space. It's not just about, well, I'm just right.
Yeah.
Again, it's not I'm right. It's right.
Maybe that's one of the boxes that I feel like ones get placed in is
the
that
perfectionist
I'm arguing right and wrong of something that is like what feels more surface level to me. Like there's a right and a wrong way to everything.
Yeah, the reformer that typically is given to the one as, well, you're just trying to go pick fights. No, it's because, I think that's a devastating misunderstanding of the one, because you miss everything that's truly of value to the one. If you have that perspective that they just go and criticize and judge and pick fights with other people, they're doing it because they're trying to avoid the consequences of wrong.
Yeah. And I think in the character of any Enneagram number, we can reach that more surface level place of like, this easily fits into this. Like we can joke about those. And like I said, there's fun and there's playfulness in that. But it is when you start to explore the depths of how that really shows up and why that shows up and what shaped that person to hold on to that.
Yeah. So with ones, you see, again, a tethering to the heart triad and the head triad and the gut triad in their core self. But in stress, ones will retreat to the space of 4. And so this space is, again, where the ones are trying so hard to work out this idea and this belief and this that rumbling that you talked about, that there is good to be pursued in the world, and there are things that need to happen. And in consistent recognition of either people are not on the same page as you and they're against you in that, or you're feeling such like the strategies you're trying are like crumbling in front of your face, that this space of, well, maybe I'm bad or maybe I'm not right in this. And so I have to spend so much energy apologizing for my badness or for just hiding myself from other people, reacting to what I perceive to be accusations about my wrongness. Again, it's that retreating into a little bit of the victim identity and the balance of, well, maybe I did the wrong thing, or maybe other people did to me and I just can't get out of it. But again, it's trying to deal with this weakness or this vulnerability or insecurity in them, that I have to, at the end of the day, be headed towards good and not towards bad. And I consistently have found that I can't do that. And so I'm struggling to crawl out of the hole of being bad or not working towards good. But if they're in a space of health, they're leaning towards the 7, which is, again, this space of letting go of the need to be right or wrong, the need to point out injustice and to always be concerned with the wrong in the world and trying to fix it. They can let that go and pay attention to the present of what can happen here and what is really meaningful in the now. Maybe that's family, maybe that's a social cause or something that you're deeply invested in. Maybe it's your faith, but some way of saying like what really, really matters. And I can see why I care so much about the wrong in the world and how it should be right. What really matters right now is this cup of tea I'm having with my friend. And I can just let that go. And whatever tries to come into the space, I can just soften around it and validate that it's there, but really just be here and now. Yeah.
The 7 is such a, and this is coming from a 1 and that being the health path, but like such a beautiful place. I think about the song that's associated with the 7 as soon as it comes on. Like my whole body just like,
yay!
Oh, it just feels so good. I love
the space of 7.
Love it so much. It feels so good there.
Yeah. So in a nutshell, that's the gut triad.
There's the gut triad.
Yeah.
Anger.
Is that what you're going to take away from?
It's in there.
After all of that, you don't see how anger could be there. The wounding of exploitation in the 8, the being completely ripped apart as a 9 and no one ever caring about it, and the idea of wrong and death being in the world for the 1. Nothing to be angry about there. Nothing to be angry about there.
So strange.
I think you're still confused on it. Like
I slightly am. It's going to be my intent. It's the intention I'm setting on a lot of self-exploration.
What does it feel like to hear that wrong exists in the world and some people do it on purpose?
Well, that makes me very angry. I don't feel it right
sure?
now. Not in this moment. I don't.
Oh, yes.
I think I just struggle to.
Just remember when we.
Yeah, I know.
Yes,
yeah.
all those moments. All the moments that we've ever experienced together.
I think when I think about anger, I imagine like this expression of anger. Like, I think I picture rage. I picture like
the behavior of one.
An audible outburst of some sort, whether that be like words or sounds or a volume that's so loud and big. It
means behavior.
Yeah. I think of the behavior, hitting something, punching something, like, and that, like, I don't know if I don't think I've ever done any of that. Like, I can't think, not with certain people. I don't think Ryan would say he's ever seen me like,
Again, that is where it's hard for the 1 to do the work that's necessary to actually recognize what hurts them. To do any of those expressive behaviors would be imperfect. We've talked about this before. Yeah. Like, identifying as perfect or identifying as like, I'm right is not the best way to go about it. The best way to go about it is like, well, I'm flawed and I'm not perfect. I'm trying. Like, I believe in good and I'm working towards it. That's way better than saying like, I'm perfect and this is good. Just in the same way, like, I don't have anger. I'm not angry. Why? Well, anger's bad. You can't blow up and cuss someone out and flip a table over. What does that do?
So is that part of the growth process? I need to be able to do that because I just can't see myself.
I mean, I think healthy anger in that way, and not to say that they're like healthy and unhealthy is the crux to die on, but what ones to me need to get in touch with is the space that can validate their worry about wrong entering the space and the consequence of wrong being in the space. that if there's wrong here, that means someone's going to be exploited, or somebody's going to be unfairly treated, or I'm going to be unfairly treated, or
criticism.
Yeah, exactly. Unduly criticized. And that is BS. Like that's wrong. I'm going to stand up for that. And to validate that experience, that, oh, sweet one, like you're trying so hard to maintain good and equality and justice in the world. Can you look at yourself, though, and see how you're having to fight those battles too? And maybe from a very early age, that was not afforded to you.
Yeah. Yeah, that feels like I can feel that more in my body, like a draw into an ability to express that kind of anger compared to having to maintain the composure and control that really shows up as like coldness, a lack of eye contact, I won't even like shift my body to you, like a wall, a detachment and a coldness, but instead to stay present and engage and allow the fire to exist. Feels like that does feel like growth and health without it having to be this like explosion.
Yeah. And I don't know a lot of ones. I mean, there's definitely the moments where, because like, especially if you put them in a certain situation where that type of explicit articulation or explosion is favored or really well respected, or like it works really well, I don't think you're going to see the explosion of a one very often, because again, that's creating so many ripples that it's so hard to not be identified as the person who'd introduced wrong into the space.
Yeah.
If it's because you're exploiting or pointing at a hypocrite, that's different than if you're just the one flying off the handle because you're reacting to something. That's very messy for a one to be doing. So I don't think you're going to see that very often, but you will see the cold cut off and rejection, and just like, you're no longer part of my life.
Yeah.
And this is the direction I'm going.
Yeah.
It's very, very precise anger, like very, very, dense.
A fellow one friend of mine says I should go to a rage room. And that's a very contained way of like maybe
contained
expressing
rage.
that.
Yeah. And it's time limited.
I think I'd be like, what do I do
here? Just hit this hammer.
Put that back together.
Yeah. I dented it.
Could be fun.
That's the gut triad. So
thanks for
processing
all of that.
Yeah, listen to more Beatrice Chestnut, and we'll link some things in the whatever it's called, bio.
The show notes.
Show notes. That's what it's called. Yep, we'll do that.
The episode bio.
Yep. Yeah, exactly. The show notes. And Sleeping at Last is a great resource, and 8, 9, and 1. I'll have songs on there, as do the other types of the Enneagram. But again, we're looking at the ways that each of these types deal with their core compulsion in the triad they live in, and how the growth path can be challenging to find, but so meaningful when you do.